Good afternoon. Tough crowd. I already know you're a tough crowd for a couple of reasons. One, you've just eaten lunch. Secondly, I get to go after a bunch of other excellent presentations, which is not always a good thing. If the other guys would just do a bad job, it would have been nice. But there's been a standard set that probably can't be met. And worse, I'm kind of from around here, and I recognize a lot of faces in this audience, and that's really quite disturbing. Because I think it was Mark Twain who said that an expert's just some guy from out of town. And often that's the way it works. I happen to be in the leadership consulting and training business, and that seems to be how it is. The expert's the guy from out of town. I don't expect that any of you remember what I talked about a few years ago. I didn't either, so I looked it up and actually watched a little bit of the video and went, man, that guy's bad. But we talked about last time was a popular myth in both the management and the leadership world. Because I do training most of my time with organizations, either public or private sector, I'll tell you what I hear all the time. I hear people tell me all the time, or ask me all the time when we're talking about some principle, do you do training in sports? Do you train coaches? Do you train sports officials? And I said, well, I get asked to speak at the odd gathering, but I actually haven't done any formal training with particular sports organizations. And then they say, well, you know what? A lot of things you're talking about apply massively to sports. And I say, I know. I've been coaching for over, I guess, about 40 years now myself in 5 different sports. I don't claim to be the coach that you guys are. I'm not claiming any expertise in coaching per se. But what I'm saying is coaching as a leadership role, as was pointed out by Dave King, it's a leadership role. And because it's a leadership role, the question then becomes, do the concepts of the business and management world apply also to the sports world and vice versa? And I'm convinced they do. The 2 examples I use the most on business courses are sports examples, because many people in the room can relate, and often they're fairly straightforward, and most people know what a hockey game is in Canada, or a hockey player is in Canada. And the other one is the family, parenting, which is also a leadership role. So, first, I really appreciate the chance that Hockey Manitoba was given me to have a mulligan. Because Hockey Manitoba has given me to have a mulligan here, because I get a do-over. Because I was in here 2 or 3 years ago, and I guess they decided that guy needs another kick at it here to see whether or not he can get it right this time. So I'm going to try to pick a somewhat different topic. I'm going to talk more broadly about leadership and the myths, not just of motivation, but a lot of the techniques and things that are now used in the management world that I'm convinced are completely counterproductive, that actually get the opposite of what you want, ironically, and actually get you to do the wrong things rather than the right things, believing you're doing the right thing. Because what I've become convinced of as a trainer, and first started my training life, well, outside of sports, is I have a background as an Air Force pilot instructor. I spent a lot of time both training Air Force pilots, but trying to develop training systems for Air Force pilots. And then I became an instructor of other Air Force pilots, and then I ran the instructor school for Air Force pilots. And then I became an operational trainer where I trained operational pilots. I was the squadron training officer operationally. So the training focus was on flying, military aircraft. And what I often hear a sports coach say is, well, failure is not an option. And I often respond, I used to work a lot in an environment where we really did think that failure wasn't an option. Flying aircraft is something where we generally prefer not to fail, because the outcomes of failure, I might argue, are a little more significant than it might be in other workplaces. And so we don't want our people to fail, and we demand a very high level of performance, and we try to train our trainers how to do that. So the question then is, and we try to train our leaders how to lead that. So let's start from the top. What's leadership? Let's define our terms. What is leadership? What is it? What's the definition of a leader, if you like? I'll spare you the time. I'll give you the standard definitions. Then I'll tell you why I think it's wrong. But this is my presentation. So, and by the way, where's Peter? Every opinion expressed up here from this stage is mine and mine alone. Don't blame Hockey Manitoba for it. He doesn't know what I'm going to say, and he hasn't endorsed it. Therefore, don't blame them for what I say. Blame me, okay? Because I'm willing to accept responsibility for what I'm about to say. Because whose presentation is this? It's mine. I tend to do 7-day courses in the workplace. I got about an hour right now, which drives me crazy because there's so much we could talk about that I have to figure out what to talk about. And what I often say at the beginning of the course is, whose course is this? We're about to embark on a 7-day course of leadership. Whose course is this? And here's the answer I get. It's our course because we only get out of it what we put into it. And if we don't apply ourselves, we're not going to learn anything, and it's whatever we make it. And I go, no, it's not. It's my course. It's my course. And they go, well, no, it's our course. I said, do you want to come up here? And they go, no, we don't want to go up there. I said, well, why not? It's your course. And they go, well, because you are supposed to teach it. And I say, what do you mean I'm supposed to teach it? Well, you're the guy teaching the course. Oh, then whose course is it? They're saying I have the responsibility to teach this course. Guess what else I also have? The authority to decide what's taught in the course. See, the only way you can hold me responsible is from a position of authority. But here's the modern teaching in leadership. Leadership's not about authority. You all see it. Go on social media, go on Facebook, go on LinkedIn, and they'll flash up leader, boss, the 2 columns. Oh, you'll find one today, I'm sure. Leader, manager. And who's the leader? The inspiring, motivating one who's a nice person. Who's the manager? The evil jerk. So the leader thinks outside the box. The manager is a stick in the mud. The leader is a visionary. The manager is status quo. The leader inspires you to want to. The manager makes you. The leader, well, the kind of person you can admire, whereas the manager, how can I summarize, is a jerk. And then everybody says, you want to be that, not that. And here's one of the ones they always say. The leader doesn't use positional authority. Managers do that because they're evil. I'm sure you've heard that theme over and over and over, haven't you, if you work in the work world? That's all BS. The definition of being in a leadership role is that you are, by definition, in a position of authority and responsibility. If you were not in an authority position of responsibility, you're not in a leadership role. Period. Now, what are you saying? It's better to be a jerk? No, it's much better if you're in that leadership role that you not be a jerk. But that's not the definition of being in a leadership role, because there are bad leaders and there are good leaders. You can do leadership poorly just like you can do it well. Not all hockey is good hockey. Not all soccer is good soccer. Not all anything is good. And the same thing's true of leadership. When we talk like leadership is only being done well, we'd say, well, that's not a leader. Yeah, it is a leader. It's a bad leader. Well, if you're a jerk, you're not a leader. Yes, you are. You're a bad leader. Why are you a leader? You're in a position of, what are the 2 things? Authority and responsibility. If you're not in a position of authority and responsibility, you're not a leader. Well, what if I'm an influencer? You can influence people without being their leader. Mother Teresa may have influenced you, but she's not your leader. You didn't even know the lady. How is she your leader? Because she influenced me. You can influence people and not be their leader. And you can be a leader who doesn't influence people. It's 4 legs and a dog. Well, dogs have 4 legs. Okay, I'm not being uninclusive here. Dogs, part of the genome of canine is 4-leggedness. Is that fair to say? Like if a dog was born with 3 legs, we'd say it had a problem in that it only had 3 legs, wouldn't we? It's not the dog's fault. It's still a dog, but 4-leggedness is part of normal dogship. Ship. Isn't that part of normal dogship, having 4 legs? Does that mean then that anything with 4 legs is showing dogship? No, you've got horseship and bullship and all kinds of ships that you can have that have nothing to do with dogs, because you can be a 4-legged horse, you can be a 4-legged bull, you can be a 4-legged cow, you can be a 4-legged cat. Well, 4-leggedness is what you want dogs to have. Yes. Therefore, if you have it, you are it. No. There's other requirements to being a dog besides having 4 legs, because you can have 4 legs and not be a dog. And you can be a nice person and not be a leader. And you can be a jerk and be a leader. Because if you're in a position of authority and responsibility, you're a leader. Okay. So Spider-Man's uncle said that with great power, thank you. That's a marvel. With great power comes great responsibility. Why? Because if you didn't have great power, we wouldn't hold you to any accountability. So what I say to my courses is, you know why it's my course? Because I'm responsible if it's taught poorly. Guess what I get with that? I get the authority to decide how the course is taught. that means I'm also accountable. You blame me. It's my call. So what I'm going to say up here, well, it's my presentation. Because it's my presentation, I get to decide what to say. And you get to decide whether you like it or not. You get to decide whether to walk out. I couldn't stop you. Nor would I want to. If you're really not interested in being here, it's really okay, because it makes it a little easier, because smaller audiences are easier. So with authority comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes authority. Okay, so let's ask a philosophical question. If leadership always involves authority and responsibility, I then ask the class, can you think of examples of that? How about parenting? Do parents have authority over their kids? Are they responsible for their kids? How about school teachers? Do they have authority over their classroom? Do they have responsibility for their classroom? How about bosses in the workplace? Do they have authority over their workers? Do they have responsibility for their workers? How about sports coaches? Do they have authority over their players? Then they also have responsibility for their players. So somebody tell me what the primary prerequisite would be for selecting somebody for a position of authority and responsibility. Seniority? Technical knowledge? Connections? Maybe formal education. In the business world, you know what the top two criteria are for picking leaders in Canada? Anybody want to guess? Seniority, either formally or informally. It's in the collective agreement that the senior person gets it. Or technical productivity. How good you are technically at what you're doing. Okay. Could you be experienced and be a lousy leader? Could you be technically sound and be a lousy leader? What's lacking? Well, Dave King spoke about the art and the science. Well, what's technical knowledge? The science. What's the art? Can you lead? Can you actually lead? Are you qualified to lead? So what's the qualifications to lead? So I was talking to all of those of you in unions, don't be offended. I do work with unions. I consult with union leadership as well. So don't go out of here going, oh, he's just an anti-union rant. Because here's what I said once to a 38-year-old union president. I said, you guys don't really believe in picking leaders based on seniority. He says, we do. He said, it's a fundamental principle of the labor movement. And I said, well, I don't think you really believe it. Why do you say that? I said, because you're 38. What's that got to do with it? I said, you're the president of the union and you're 38. There's guys in this company who have more seniority than you have life. There's guys here with 40 years of seniority and you're only 38 years old, yet how do you get to be the president if your union believes in picking leaders based on seniority? He said, well, we have a vote. Right. That's the mechanism, but what criteria are you applying? Well, we pick whoever we think is best for the job. There we go. That's not seniority. If it was seniority, you wouldn't have a vote. If you're going by seniority, the number one guy in the seniority list would be the president as of right. Number two would be the VP as of right. Every steward would be the senior guy in the shop, and you wouldn't need a vote because you would know that the best way to pick leaders is seniority. But you don't believe it. That's why you don't do it. And he turned to his VP, who was about 42, and said, who's our number one guy in the seniority list right now? And he goes, oh, that's Stan Smith. My apologies if anybody's actually named Stan Smith. That wasn't his real name. And the guy looks at him and goes, Stan Smith? He's a doofus and a moron. And I said, well, if you're using seniority as your criteria, that's who you would pick. But you don't ruin your organization by applying that criteria. You try to convince the company to. And then the company appoints someone based on seniority, and then they blame the union and don't take responsibility for it. So we got the company blaming the union that they put the senior guy in there, and then we got the union saying we believe in seniority for leaders, and then they don't apply it to themselves. So which of the two are being hypocrites? Both. And then they say, well, it's in the contract. And I go, well, the contract says senior qualified. And I say, so what's the qualification for leadership then? Breathing? If you're going to promote the senior breather, then the qualification would be breathing. So you pick the senior guy. So I'm doing a course out of province, out west. Won't name the province. Don't want you to identify the company. I'm in town doing another leadership course, and one of the guys who's been on it before, he's a senior manager, big international company, calls me up and says, Linton, I'd like to pick your brain because I got an issue. Can we have a supper? Can I buy you a supper and I'll pick your brain? I said, it's pretty slim pickings at the end of the day, but I'll take steak. And he said, okay, steak it is. I'll meet you at that place at this time. So I show up, we get talking, and he said, here's my problem. I got this guy working for me, and he's scary. Like, he's really scary. I'm afraid he's going to go postal one day and he might hurt people, and we're in an environment where it would be easy to hurt people if a guy lost it, because we're working with a lot of machinery and equipment and processes that can be quite hazardous. He said, this guy is so scary, let me tell you, and I've actually briefed my wife that if she sees a red half-ton of this make and model sitting in the driveway or on the street, she's to lock the door, get herself and the kids in the basement, and phone 911. I said, that's how scary this guy is? That's how scary this guy is. He says, my question is, how do I get him out of the workplace without it being the triggering event? Because I read that sometimes in the paper, that the guy went postal because he got fired. So how do I do this without having him come back to work or go over to my house? And I went, whoa, thanks for the steak. I really appreciate the steak, but this is way beyond my qualification level. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a shrink. I'm not a psychiatrist. You should really talk to somebody who knows something about this. He said, yeah, I guess that's a good idea. I said, no, you really should. If I was in your shoes, that's what I would do. I wouldn't pretend to know what triggers guys like this. I don't really know. Yeah. But you know what the funny thing is? We just had the competition for the supervisor spot, and he won. I said, well, then you'll be promoting him, right? He said, are you crazy? He's a psychopath. I understand you're getting, and I've heard some of the very good information on how sometimes your process is the problem. What does that say about that selection process if it's picking a psychopath? You got the wrong criteria, because he got bonus points for being here a long time, seniority. He's got the technical level 3 whatever in whatever machine he works on, and he's got all the little checks and little boxes that we can measure and quantify. Have you got a level whatever coaching certificate? Have you got a certain amount of years? And where did you play? Did you play junior or not at all? Would we ask that type of question of coaches? What do you think? And use that kind of criteria? We might. Businesses do it all the time because we like things that are measurable and quantifiable in assessing people, don't we? Well, they can also spoke about the intangibles. There's intangibles in hockey players. Are there intangibles in coaches? So what's the word we're driving at here? Your grandparents used to use it. We don't use it much anymore because now we talk about emotional intelligence and personality type. So we Myers-Briggs ourselves to death. We emotional intelligence ourselves to death. But what is really the issue here we're talking about, that this guy doesn't think this guy should be a supervisor or even working in the company? What is the issue? It's character. It's character. It's as simple as that, character. Do you know that in the management business world, training, anti-harassment training, respectful work training, don't be a jerk training is a billion-dollar industry? Why would it be? Why do we need to spend billions of dollars training leaders not to be jerks? Because we've identified a problem. What would that be? A lot of our leaders happen to be. You take a jerk and put him on a Be Nice course, you have a jerk who's been on a Be Nice course. Because there's some things you can train and there's some things you select for. And what I try to teach the organizations I work with is that the absolute number one criteria for selecting leaders is character. But that creates a problem with managers because they've been to management school, as I have, and you can't measure character. There are no units of character. There's no character-o-meter. There's no character scale. But do you know a jerk when you see one? We can't seem to fire them in the business world. We send them on Be Nice training. Because the theory is if we train that, they will not be jerks anymore. My very strongly held view, after observing it for about 20 years as a consultant in the workplace, is you take a jerk and put him on a Be Nice course, you've got a jerk who's been on a Be Nice course. You take a psychopath and send him to charm school, you've got a psychopath who's been sent to charm school. So here's my challenge to you as sports people. I'm a sports guy, and the sport I'm most involved with now is soccer. But I used to coach a lot of hockey, and I've played tons of sports adequately. I'm probably inflating my skill level. I played at some reasonably competitive levels, but I'm sure most of you have played higher level sports than I have. But interestingly enough, we now think that the solution to having some jerk coaches is to make every coach not take non-jerk training. So what we have is, we've got a process that's trying to fix the jerks. But my question is, why are we selecting jerks? Because if you need to send somebody to a course teaching them not to abuse kids, guess what position they should not be in? A position of authority over kids. How did they get that position of authority over kids? It must have been by some other criteria, which must have been, there's leaders within those organizations which either didn't know or when they find out, fail to act. And the advice I give organizations, I say, you've got the same problem, because I deal with it all the time in organizations. I say, so this guy does this and he does this, why is he working for you as a leader? Why do you still have authority over people? And they go, well, that's just Frank. My apologies to the Franks in the room. They say, well, that's just Frank, and that's how Frank's always been. But you know what? He wins. Well, again, as you were taught last night and this morning, you might be winning despite the fact you've got a bad process of selection, not because you've got a good process of selection. Because there are other factors to determine whether teams win besides whether the coach is a psychopath. There can be coaches at very high levels who have bad character because we selected them poorly, and if they have good athletes and run a good system, well, that part of the process is good, so that overcomes the bad part, how we selected them. There's many variables in determining a team's success. But the key function of leadership is you're in an authority position. And so the craze and the trend now in the management world is to teach leaders you're not in a position of authority. So what do we got now? We got leaders running around saying things like this. I'm not speaking as your boss right now. I'm speaking more as your friend. Here's what I teach them. Stop that. Because now you're just being manipulative. Because you are their boss and they know you are. You know how I know that you're speaking as their boss, I say? It's two reasons. You're speaking and you're their boss. And when I put those two together, you know what I think you are? You're speaking as their boss. Are you not speaking as their boss? But when I say, well, this is not business, this is just, you got to pick up, don't you? I'm just moving some furniture on Saturday. You don't have to. I'm just asking if you had some free time, if maybe you could come over and give me a hand moving it. You don't think you're speaking from a position of authority when you ask that guy to bring his truck over and help you? Oh, no, I'm sure he didn't take it that way. You didn't mean it that way. You don't think he knows you're his boss? You don't think you know you control his life and his livelihood? You don't think he knows that? You don't think it influences? Oh, can I throw another one at you? Hey, parents, don't blame me that I asked your kid to be at the rink 2 hours before practice. It was a team decision, because I asked all the 14-year-old boys if they were okay with it, and they all nodded. Therefore, don't blame me. It was a team decision. If you're a coach, you're in a position of stop blaming the 14-year-olds. I call it the Pontius Pilate defense. The group wanted it, so I ordered it. I washed my hands. Yeah, but there's only one person in that gathering who's in a position of authority, and that's Pontius Pilate, wasn't it? But he wants to wash his hands and blame the group because I did the modern management training. I'm not in a position of authority. I just developed you ready for it? Consensus and buy-in. That's all I do. I just happen to be doing it from a position of authority while I'm pretending I'm not in a position of authority. You're in a position of authority. Get over yourself. People do what you say because you're in a position of authority. Because ultimately they have no choice if you're in a position of authority. So you're saying you should act authoritative. No, as a matter of fact, the fact you recognize you have authority allows you to chill. You don't have to tread heavily because you carry the big stick, and everybody knows you carry the big stick, so you can actually speak softly. In the military, we had a term called command presence. You know, command presence is not the guy going nuts. Actually, command presence is probably the calmest guy in the room. Matter of fact, you want your commander to be the calmest guy in the room. It's exactly what you want. So the number one criteria in the business world, I'm 100% convinced, for selecting leaders is character. So my challenge to all of us, I'm not saying I'm immune from it, is to ask ourselves this question. Do we have coaches of bad character? If you remember, if you want to go look at the video, you can if you want, but I'm just going to revise something I said last time. There's 4 reasons why people perform poorly. There's 4 reasons why people perform poorly. They don't understand what to do. They lack the capability. There's an obstacle preventing them. That's your processes and systems. Or they're not motivated enough. They're not willing. They're not trying. UCAL, understanding, capability, obstacles, willingness. Those are the 4 reasons people blow it. Human beings tend to assume that other people aren't willing and trying enough when they fail. That's a mistake we make. It's a common error. I said number 2 is capability. There's 2 things that determine your capability. One is your aptitude. Your aptitude. Some people shouldn't be military pilots. No matter how hard they try, sorry, we had a saying for it. Nice guy, can't fly. But if you really, really want it, can you? No, sorry. And I won't play basketball in the NBA. It's not going to happen, no matter how much I want it. And I'm not going to be an astronaut. So aptitude. How do you get aptitude? You select for it. So here's the principle. You select for the things that are toughest to change. And you train the stuff that's easy to change. I'll say it again. You select for the things that are toughest to change. Then you train the things that are easy. So an absolute disqualifier for a military pilot is a lack of visual acuity. If you don't have 20/20 when you start, sorry. It's not my fault. We know. We like pilots who see. Sounds like bigotry. Call it what you want. It's a certain requirement for vision. Now, after a while, most people's vision gets worse as they get older, so we start with 20/20 as a minimum, and then we'll allow you to correct it later. But we can't start when you're 22 because it's probably going to get worse, we found. So we select for eyesight. It's one of the criteria. Nothing you can do about it. It's God-given. It's genetic. Sorry, you got a lot. No hard feelings. You're just not the line of work you're going to be in. So you select for the things you can't change, and then you train the things you can change. Because there's 2 things that determine your capability. Gretzky was a great player, both because he was a natural and because he got lots of ice time, good coaching from his dad, backyard rink when he was 3 years old, and played age advanced in the OHA. So he got lots of training, but he also had a real knack. He had aptitude. You need both to be good at something. So, trick question, what's the toughest thing to change in a leader? Their character. Toughest thing to change. So what should be the number 1 selection criteria for a leader? Their character. Has to be. And philosophically, why? We're about to put them in a position of authority. There's a second thing you need as a leader. I'm telling you the 2 big requirements today for leadership. And I teach this all across the country. I make a living teaching this stuff, believe it or not. I know you're finding it hard to believe right now. But the first thing is character, and the second thing is something else your grandparents used to say, wisdom. And wisdom is not intelligence, and it's not technical knowledge. So when we teach our kids don't eat dog poo, that's not because eating the dog poo was stupid, it's because it's unwise. Okay, so people often say, well, that's stupid. I go, mostly what we call that stupid, we mean it's unwise. The guy jumped off a bridge, that's stupid. No, it's unwise. Now, if you're a really good high-level diver, you might be able to jump off the bridge and survive. Well, then you might argue, well, your skill allowed you to survive. Yes, so they were foolish but skilled. Like there's a guy who ate a car. There's a guy out there who ate a car. And people say, well, that's stupid. No, I think the guy who ate the car is actually very intelligent. Do you know why I think he's intelligent? He lived. If a stupid guy ate a car, he'd die. Because he would not find the mechanisms and the techniques to eat it and survive. And there's no do-it-yourself videos for eating cars out there that I can see. There's no how to eat cars for dummies in the bookstore. So if you're going to eat a car, you're pretty much on your own, so you got to figure it out yourself. What would you need to figure out how to eat the car yourself? Intelligence. What is it to decide that that's your life work? Foolish. It's folly. The opposite of wisdom is folly. So, when I deal with managers and people in the business world, very few of them are actually very stupid. Because they often got to where they are because they're intelligent people and capable people. Yet I believe that what they've often bought into is a foolish philosophy. That's the second biggest problem leaders have. The first is the really bad ones lack character. What do you have to do with them? If you're a business and you have a leader with bad character, what's the solution? Deselection. Because you select for the things that are toughest to change. You think you're going to change his character? You're probably not. Character can change, but it usually takes a significant life experience, a person deciding to revoke and renounce their past practices and beliefs, and often a significant life experience, near-death experience. Often people tell me, I had the same thing happen, that when they get married or they have kids, it changes their character. They become more responsible and less selfish when they had kids. Did any of you find that happen? Well, that's a change of character, but you doesn't get that through training. That was a life experience that made you think, man, I got a kid now. I have to be more responsible. It can't just be about me anymore, which is a good thing. So there's an age-old story of this king who had a two women come before him claiming, this is my child, Solomon. So both women said, this is my kid. Well, he didn't have DNA, but Solomon knew enough to know, I don't think they're both right. I think at least one of them must be misstating the truth, that's not their kid. And remember that story? So what did Solomon say? So he could have not heard the case. He could have said, I don't do child custody. I'm the stinking king. Get out of here. Sort it out yourselves. Oh, by the way, a popular leadership option, if two of your players are fighting, have them sort it out themselves, because I don't take responsibility for my team. I dump it on you and let the biggest, strongest bully win. Well, they got to sort it out themselves because I don't want to deal with it. Well, Solomon didn't say that. He said, I will deal with it. I will hear the case. That's character. He wanted to do the right thing. What was the solution? Because he hasn't got DNA. Cut the child in half. Bring me a sword. Divide the child asunder. Give half to each of the woman. By the way, that's a management decision. You can always take resources and cut them in half, and it's a human resource, and you can always divide them amongst managers, can't you? That's what you do with resources. Anybody know what happened? The one woman said, do not harm the child. Give the child to the other woman rather than harm the child. I relinquish my claim so the child is not hurt. And the other woman said, good idea, O king. What could be fairer? Let's divide asunder. And what did that tell Solomon? Methinks I know who the real mum is. Do we know he's right? We don't. There's no DNA test. Is it possible that some women are actually homicidal toward their own children? Very, very small percentage, but there are some. So is it technically possible? What am I doing wrong here? Are we good? Can you hear me? Is it technically possible that the mom said cut the kid in half and the stranger said don't? It is. But he'd still be better off giving the child to the woman who said don't hurt the kid. Wouldn't he? Even if it's not the real biological mom, we should still choose. You see, a lot of people think that story is about Solomon doing the right thing for the real mom. I interpret it differently because I'm wacko and because of what I do for a living. Here's my interpretation of that story. That's Solomon doing the right thing by the child. Because he had enough wisdom to know that you don't give authority over a child to somebody who would see them die. You give authority over the child who would give up their own rights to see the child not harmed. That's the one who gets authority and responsibility for this kid for the next 20 years. You know what Solomon was doing in that story? Leadership selection. What criteria was he using? Which one would see the child harmed and which one would not? That will be my test. Can you measure that? In units or figures or numbers? You cannot. But we know it when we see it. I've got a couple of companies that's very interesting. We've been running the experiment now for about 10 or 15 years, who've gone so hard over on selecting for leadership that they've had to really ramp up their technical training. Because they've selected a lot of leaders who aren't that technically sound because of their character. Because everybody respects them so much and the kind of people they are, they've picked people who aren't necessarily the best technician, and they've had to upgrade their technical skills because, and you know what they're telling me universally? It's way easier to upgrade that guy's technical skills than to take a jerk and make him a non-jerk. Because that we tried for decades and it failed. Now we're picking the non-jerk and teaching him the technical stuff he needs to know. Hey, I come from a technical background. We want to be able to fly the plane. We really do. But the irony is, if we put jerks as instructors, you don't even learn how to fly the plane. So who can carry out the art of leadership? People with good character and with wisdom. How do they get wisdom? That you can teach if you have the foundation of good character. Because if you have good character, you get older but wiser. If you have bad character, you get older and more bitter and twisted. Because not everybody gets older, gets wiser. So you can, if you select for character, you can teach those people how to think, which is what I'm going to call wisdom. How do you think? Okay. So how do you think? Well, I offered 2 or 3 years ago an example of how we should think. How should we think? We should think that the people who play for us are trying to play well. Okay, that's what I'm going to suggest is a principle of wise coaching. Your player is not trying to miss the net. They are not trying to blow it. And no amount of getting mad at them or offering them more motivation makes them better at hitting the net because it's not a motivation issue. Motivation only helps if the problem is motivation. And what player wants to miss the net? Give me an estimate of how many players, when they're trying to score, prefer to miss the net. 0. I'll give you the business analogy. You get your targets, it goes good for you. You don't get your targets, it goes bad for you. What is that intended to do? Motivate. Well, ironically, when you do it unwisely, you have the opposite effect. Because here's the 2 messages we send to workers in the business world. 1, we want you to get your target. Would you guys mind pushing those doors open just so we get a little more oxygen? Somebody near the doors and lock them open. We'll accept the noise if that's okay. Can we do that? Thanks. He says with authority, he pretends that he doesn't have any authority. So, where was I? Help me out. Getting old. Oh yeah, motivation. You can only fix performance with a motivational tool if the problem was motivation. Okay? So what are the odds that motivation is the reason they're missing the net? 0. Absolutely 0. So back to the workplace. Get your targets so it goes good for you. And we're measuring them, by the way. But we want you to be ambitious and aim high. Those 2 themes are not complementary, they're contradictory. I'm sure you will see the logic when I explain it. The higher I set my goal, the less likely I am to. The lower I set my goal, the more likely I am to. So don't tell me to both aim high and make sure I get my goals, because the best way to make sure I get my goals is to aim low. It's called sandbagging. You say you want 1,000 units from me? Oh, boss, that's not possible. Machine breaks down. So we talk them down to keep ourselves safe. So what the management will come up with? Stretch goals. Because we have to compensate for the fact that you're sandbagging us with the system we created to motivate you. You're opposed to goals. No, you should know where you're trying to go. I'm opposed to evaluating employees based on goals. Why? It has the opposite effect. It makes them aim low. Because how do you make sure you meet your goals? By aiming low. So taking the flying example, if I promise you Vancouver today and don't make it, and I get blasted for it, what I learn to do is promise you Calgary tomorrow. And if I get in there and realize I can make Vancouver, I'm going to land in Calgary anyway, so you don't expect it tomorrow. Because now I stand by my production to make sure that they don't expect it tomorrow. Do workers ever say that in the modern workplace? Let's slow down so management doesn't expect it next time. Those of you who work in real jobs, not like me, I just talk for a living. Those of you who work in real jobs, do you find that happens? Of course it does, because of the system we put in place. Ironically, what were we trying to do? Motivate them, but our instincts are wrong. We're actually demotivating them. You want another example? Performance evaluations. They actually demotivate. Now think about it. Remember I said there's 4 reasons people perform poorly. What are they? They lack understanding, UCAL, understanding, capability, obstacles, and willingness. So, if they don't understand their job, they're going to fail. If they're incapable of doing it, they're going to fail. If they have an obstacle, they're going to fail. And if they're not motivated, they're going to fail. They're not willing. So, if I give you a low score in your performance evaluation, does that make you understand your job better? Does it make you more capable of doing your job? Does it provide better system, resources, and processes to do your job? 0 for 3. Then what must I be doing when I just say that's not good enough? Assuming you're not motivated. Another false assumption. so I come in and give you a low score. That's a motivator. You're doing your best, and I gave you a low score. Tell me how motivated you are. Tell me how motivated you are. Okay. How many hockey players are trying to play hockey poorly? Give me a rough estimate. Another good point was made this morning. A lot of apparent errors in athletes, the research clearly shows this. It's certainly true in hockey. It's true in other sports as well. It's absolutely true in military aviation and the business world. That we perceive to be a skill problem is actually a confidence problem. The person freezes or is paralyzed or can't make a decision, or, as Dave King explained very well, they don't want the puck. They get rid of the puck as soon as they get it. You see it in soccer too, in basketball. They don't want the ball, so they get rid of the ball right away. So then we say, well, the kid has no ball sense or no sport sense or no situational awareness, is what as Air Force pilots would call it. When the truth is they're just so scared of making a mistake that they want to get rid of the ball so they don't make a mistake. And then they make the mistake of getting rid of the ball or the puck, ironically. So here we go. Well, the solution then is to build their self-esteem and tell them they can be anything they want to be. Because if we tell them they're so amazing and wonderful that they will never fail, that will build their confidence. That doesn't build their confidence, it destroys it. You don't build someone's confidence by assuring them they will succeed. You build their confidence by telling them it's okay if you fail. Confidence is not the assurance of success. It's the absence of fear of failure. The only way the kid can aim for the corner of the net is if they're not afraid of missing the net. If they're afraid of missing the net, they're going to aim for the center of that 6x4 target to make sure nobody shouts at them for missing the net. And now their performance has actually been undermined by our attempts to motivate them by saying, you got to hit the net. My theory? It's really worked in soccer. I started to do it at the end of my hockey coaching, and I thought I had tremendous results. If you're not missing the net on at least a third of your shots, there's no way you're aiming for corners. Nobody can aim for corners and hit them all the time. You got to be missing the net from time to time, or you're aiming in the wrong place. So I'm okay if you miss the net. I just want you to aim for corners. And I'm going to ask you is, where were you aiming? Did you pick a spot, or did you just blast away at that rectangle? Because if you blast away at the rectangle, you're going to hit them in the logo. Because your brain goes, avoid risk of error, hit the center of the net. And that's what they do. They hit the center of the net. You know how you make sure you get your volleyball serves in? Serve them soft, high, and in the middle of the court. Guess what good teams do with that? Those of you who are involved in volleyball. They eat you up. But my serve percentage was good, because what are they keeping stats on? How many serves do I get in? So remember when Line A scored his 5 goals, you Jets fans, last year, and they said afterwards he scored 5 goals and 5 shots? No, he didn't. He took 9. 4 of them missed the net, barely. And 4 of them were inside the post. Actually, one was 5-hole. And the other 4 were just inside the post, barely. He says, I'm just trying to get it on net. I don't believe him. I don't believe he's trying to get it on net. I don't believe him. Because how come such a high percentage of these shots are around the perimeter of the net then? Do you know top goal scorers hit a lot of goal posts? Why? Because they have confidence to aim out the edge where they might increase their chances of missing, but also of scoring. But if all they hear is, oh, don't miss the net, which way are they going to lean? Towards the center of mass. And they're going to thump the logo, and everybody's going to go, good shot, at least hit the net. Well, if you make that the goal, you'll get it. If the goal is to hit the net, you will get shots on net. What is your goal? Shots on net or goals? Drive your process toward what your goal actually is, scoring. So I believe that offensive players who have the confidence to aim for corners are players who are not afraid of missing the net. Their confidence isn't, I'm sure I will hit the net. Their confidence is, it's okay if I miss. Because we know they're not trying to miss anyway. You don't need to address that. They're already trying to hit it. You didn't need to make them not scared of aiming for corners. Now that's a challenge. Because the intuition is wrong. So here's my next point. So much of what we do that's unwise as leaders is because our intuition is wrong, which is why you have to train it. Now that's an area for training, where your thinking is wrong, where your intuition is wrong. Am I doing something wrong? What can I do here? Stop waving around so much? Where the intuition is wrong, or the thinking is wrong, we can correct it. All due apologies to Malcolm Gladwell. He writes very interesting books. Anybody familiar with the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell? The theme of the book is trust your intuition. Whatever comes into your head first will be a good idea. And then he has lots of anecdotes about people who did that and it worked out, people who didn't do that and it didn't work out. See? You got to trust your instincts. That person did and they lived. That person didn't, they died. There you go. I hear people say it every day. You know, I should have trusted my instincts. I should have done it. Okay, let's analyze that model for deciding how we perform. So let's say you're a little kid. If you want to see what the instincts are, look at a little kid. Because they haven't had much training. So what are they basing most of their decisions on? Whatever is instinctive or intuitive. So the kid's playing in the front yard with the ball, and the ball rolls out into the street. What is the kid's instinct? Chase the ball into the street. Is that the right or wrong decision? And what do they discover? It's a quiet street in a suburban neighborhood. There's no car. Matter of fact, there's only a car every 20 minutes. And the car is only in threat zone 10 seconds every 20 minutes. What's 10 seconds every 20 minutes? 20 times 1/6 of a minute, that's 120. So there's a chance 1 in 120 there's a car threatening the kid when they chase into the street. So what do they experience? Well, experience is the best teacher. Actually, no, experience is often a horrible teacher. Because we base our experience on results, and our results fool us. So, you want an example of that? I know a guy who screams at his players all the time, and they win. So it works. You're judging the outcome as opposed to what the guy did. Let's go back. So, the ball goes into the street, kid chasing the street, there's no car. What does the kid conclude? This is a safe procedure, because I didn't get hit. So they do it 20, 30, 40 times, still no car. Now they go, I've got a big sampling now in my experiment. Matter of fact, I got a theory. Running into the street keeps cars away. Because I see cars go by, but they never go by when I run in the street. It hasn't happened yet. Therefore, I'm thinking maybe running in the street actually keeps cars away. So we make them the senior kid on the street instead of them start training the other kids. Just run into the street. It's worked for me for years. What do you mean? No, it's worked for me for years. I run in the street, never seen a car. But there are cars. Yeah, but never when I run into the street. Try it. Have you ever tried it? Well, I convinced I haven't. Well, you got to do that. So then one day, after all those tries, a car comes. And the driver stops, thereby confirming the kid's theory that it's safe to run in front of cars. First, it keeps most of them away. We got this filter. If I run into the street, it keeps cars away. But the odd one sneaks through. But it stops anyway. And I know why it stopped. Because I ran in front of it. In fact, that's what the driver told me. Oh, I saw you run in front of the car, so I stopped. Cool. Now that confirms my theory. The best practice is to run in the street, and now it becomes a management best practice. We've been doing it for years. And no kid ever got killed, so. Matter of fact, if you're going to use only experience as a teacher, what's the only way the kid can learn not to chase the ball into the street? Do you know in military aviation we try not to use that approach? I know you might find this hard to believe, but we actually decided that the approach we wanted to take to teach people to fly was not to let them learn from their mistakes and let experience be the best teacher. Because how will you learn that that will crash and kill you? You would have to crash and die for that to happen. And we think that hurts your future performance more than correcting you. It does. And you're always the first guy at the scene of the accident. You really are. And it ruins your whole day. Like it really does. It ruins your whole day. So what we say is, don't chase the ball on the street. And then we give you enough repetitions and sequencing and reminders with verbal reinforcement until we know you think of it on your own. What I'm telling you is, if you say to your kid, don't chase the ball on the street, or you might get hit by a car and die, that motivation will not have them think of it. Because why do people die in aviation? Because they don't think of the thing that will kill them or keep them alive, even though we've trained it briefly. We train stalls with pilots at about the third or fourth hour of flying training. Still the most common cause of aircraft accidents in the airline world with pilots with tens of thousands of hours is the stall. Because the plane gets near the stall, and the stall is not the engine dying, it's the wing not flying. And we got all these warning systems to tell them, and you're supposed to push, not pull, but that's counterintuitive because you want to pull to keep the plane in the air. That just stalls it worse, and the nose goes down and they die. And we tell them this over and over and over, and they still do it wrong. The only way you get rid of it is by doing massive drilling and repetition and drilling and repetition and drilling and repetition. Saying it won't do it. What did we used to assume? That the guys who were doing it wrong needed to be fined or suspended. For example, gear up landings. We tried to fix gear up landings by effectively giving the pilots what would be the equivalent of push-ups or laps. How? If you landed gear up, you got fined, you got suspended, you got fired. We could not fix it. Pilots landed without putting the gear down? Yes. Okay, now how many pilots know the gear has to go down before they land? All of them. It's a standard operating procedure in every carrier and every Air Force in the world. Because we like the rubber rolly things better than the metal grindy things. We do. We prefer rubber to aluminum on that asphalt. Yet pilots still landed gear up. And so one day we changed our philosophy from we're going to punish these idiot pilots until they stop making that mistake to we don't think they're actually doing it on purpose. There must be something about our training that says they're not learning it so that they think of it when they need it. And that actually worked. And then we put a system in place. This is your processes. We put a system in place like warning systems and computers to tell them when their gear wasn't down. And now we got a system that goes too low, whoop, whoop, gear, too low, whoop, whoop, gear. And usually when the pilot hears that, he puts the gear down. Usually. I'm not kidding when I say usually. So my point is, when we changed our philosophy from the very unwise, if you don't do what we told you, we'll assume you're unwilling and treat you accordingly, to the wise, you didn't think of it, then there's something in our training that didn't provide you with enough mental rehearsal to allow you to think of it with the cue that you needed at the time you needed it. So we're going to fix our training. I don't fly with the Air Force anymore. I only fly privately. When I'm flying a private civilian airplane with the gear down and welded, like it doesn't come up, I can't help but check the gear 3 times on final approach. I'm still doing it. And I got to go, oh yeah, this gear doesn't come up. Then I look and I check the gear, oh yeah, this gear doesn't come up. Oh yeah, fixed gear airplane. It became so ingrained in me that I can't help but check it 3 times on final approach. I cannot go flying without checking it 3 times, because you know what? It's not because I want it so much, it's because I got trained effectively on how to do that. When they dropped the assumption that I was unwilling and moved to the assumption that I'm willing, I just haven't got the capability yet to think of it in real time when I need it. Because I get distracted, and that distraction takes me off task. So here's my evolution as a coach. 30 or 40 years ago, I'm big on passing. I coached a lot of basketball, soccer, hockey. I'm a passing guy. One player of mine said once, all coaches say they want you to pass, but this guy actually means it. So he will say, pass up the shot to make the pass to the guy in the far post to the empty net tap. And you got to see that guy. You got to make that pass. You know what I used to assume when players wouldn't pass? They were selfish. That sounds like a plausible explanation, doesn't it? I'm now convinced that it's a very small minority of the guys who don't make a pass are being selfish. I think they don't see it. I think they don't get their head up and see it. They get into the zone around the net. And by the way, what do they have? About 300 people screaming at them? Shoot! Or if you're a pro, 15,000 people screaming at you? Shoot! So they don't see it. They bury their head and they drive it towards the center of mass, the 4x6 target. You think it happens at the pro level? Absolutely. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I mean, I haven't coached at the pro level, but I'm convinced often they just don't see it. And if you showed them the tape, they'd go, oh, the guy's wide open. How come I didn't see him? Because we haven't done enough teaching to see that. Because I found when I started teaching and running drills to have them see it and to make that pause, that little hesitation before you let the shot go to see whether there's a guy with an empty net tap in, they started to make that pass, proving they were not unwilling once they saw it. But seeing its capability, it's training, it's not motivation. You have to focus your training where the instincts are. All effective training focuses on the areas where the instincts or intuitions are wrong. If it was true that you could learn something or do something just by your instincts and intuitions, every person would be an expert the first time they did something. They would just do whatever came into their head first. So you or I could do brain surgery. We just open his skull and go, well, I'm going to trust my instincts. And I think maybe if we cut some of that out, it'll be better. Or heart surgery. I'm thinking maybe this valve. Well, what do you think? No, I got the same instinct. Okay, we're good then. No, what we actually do is we take and train these guys for like a decade. I thought you could trust your instincts. This is why novices are bad at things. So in sports, hockey, soccer, basketball, what's the instinct of the player? To always go forward. Try to teach them to go sideways or back or to switch the puck or the ball from one side to the other. It's counterintuitive. How do they want to play defense? They want to fish for the ball or the puck. Counterintuitive. You've got to teach them play the man. Everything in sports that's critical training, just like everything in pilot training, the stuff that works is the counterintuitive. You've got to figure out what is the thing that the normal person does instinctively wrong and focus your training on that. Find the areas where the instincts are wrong. And there's lots of them where the instincts are wrong. Do you know there's lots of areas in leadership where the instincts are wrong? If I give the guy enough motivation, he'll play better. Not true. That's only true if he's trying to play poorly. I asked you how many kids are trying to play poorly. But our instincts take over, and so we don't think it through rationally and logically because we haven't had enough training as leaders. So I've, for the last 20 years, been talking to managers about, do you see why it's wrong? Do you see how your performance evaluations are actually demotivating people? And how your target-based awards actually make them sandbag you? And they go, well, that's exactly what happens. Why? Because your instincts are wrong. Matter of fact, you can only get someone to aim for an aggressive target if they know it's okay if they don't make it. Ironically. If I know you're not going to nuke me if I don't make it, then I can go for it. The secret to confidence is not telling them you will succeed. The secret to confidence is saying, it's okay if you don't make it. As long as I know you're trying, it's okay if you don't make it. And you may try and fail. We all do. We all try and fail. That's why I'm getting a mulligan and a do-over here. And I appreciate it. I'm getting another crack at it. Tried once, failed. So I get another try. But I wasn't trying to fail. When people fail, they're very seldom trying to fail. If they were, if you're a boss in the workplace and the guy was defying you and saying, I won't do it, why don't you try to make me? What do you do with that guy? You deselect him. You fire him. I'll give you one more thought. We say you win as a team and lose as a team. Ever heard that one? And then we say the keys to teamwork are motivation. Pardon me, not motivation. The key to teamwork is communication. Not true. I think the two most important keys to teamwork are eliminating internal competition and eliminating internal misconduct. Well, what about a one-on-one drill in hockey? You're competing. No, that's good, but I'm not doing it so that I get a higher spot on the lineup than that kid. I'm doing it as his friend because when we compete against each other hard, we make each other better. So what I would explain to my forwards is, don't go easy. Try to beat the guy on the one-on-one drill because the other team's going to try to beat the guy one-on-one. So to properly prepare your teammate, you play as hard as you can. Otherwise, you're not preparing him properly. I need you to play hard in practice so the other guy knows how to resist players who are playing hard. Otherwise, they go into the game unprepared. You're actually doing the guy a favor by playing hard against him in practice. You're not doing it because you want to be on the first line instead of him. You're doing it because you want him to improve as well, and you want him to benefit from this drill as much as you do. Well, companies have top employee awards. It's folly. It's a mistake, and I deal with the wreckage of it all over the place. So let me bring you back to the metaphor I used at the beginning. What were the 4 leadership roles I talked about? Bosses, coaches, teachers, parents. So here's a rule of thumb. If it would be unwise for a parent to do with their kids, it's unwise for a coach to do it in sports or a boss to do it in the workplace. The only difference in the workplace is you get to hire and fire your workers. You don't get to hire and fire your kids. You're stuck with your kids. But the flip side is your kids are stuck with you. So, or us, I'm getting a do-over there too because now I have my first grandkid. So now my theory of parenting is spoil them rotten, of course. Why? Because I'm not really responsible, so I get to spoil them rotten. And my son has to say, Dad, we're trying to teach him not to. Oh, yeah, I know, but what's a little bit of? So then I have to remember authority. He's the parent, not me. Don't undermine. You know grandparents undermine? Anyway. My point here is that when you create internal competition, you will destroy your family. So how about this for a model? Kids, there's going to be a trip to Disney this year. This is the metaphor I use for people in the management world who want to hand out prizes to some workers and not others in terms of how well they've got their targets this year. And I say, kids, there's going to be a trip to Disney this year, and there's 3 of you. One of you is going to get to go to Disney and go on the rides. The second one is going to go to Disney, but they're going to hold the bags for the other kid when they go on their rides. And the third one's staying home to take care of Rover. So you want to be that kid that finishes first, not the kid who finishes last. Now go out there and be a team and cooperate with each other and work together. I'm convinced that the people who come off the TV show, these competition shows like American Idol, must be absolutely neurotic afterwards. Because what's the theme of American Idol? Cooperate with your fellow contestants and cheer them on and help them succeed and try to beat them. How can you do both? Competition is the opposite of cooperation. Well, then you're not playing competitive sports. I did. I coached them quite competitive sports, especially soccer. Well, you got to have a starting lineup. Why? We say win as a team, lose as a team. What's the only way to pay an amateur player? Playing time. Did they come to practice? Did they do the work? Did they pay the fees? Did they pay for the hotel room at the tournament? Yes, 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 yes. So would you take one kid to Disney and not the other, or will it destroy your team? It's a philosophical question. They're not being paid $3 million to stand on the bench. They're paying to sit on the bench. Well, I had no choice, except responsibility in a position of authority. I would encourage you, if you're coaches, if you're doing Player of the Game awards, to stop them. Because when the leader picks out one of the players in the group as a star, it creates internal competition and resentment within your players. How many of you parents have Kid of the Month award? How many of you, you disagree? How many of you sit down at the end of the month and say, well, let's review your performance. Here's the top ranked kid. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. You're the first kid. You're the second kid. You're the third kid. No, we only go first line, second line, third line. That's not destructive, is it, for a leader to do that? My opinion, you're getting it because I happen to have the stage, is that if you say as a leader that we win and lose as a team, and then you only pay some of your players, because in amateur hockey there's only one way to pay your players, and that's playing time. I actually honestly believe it's unethical. Or at least unwise. It only becomes unethical after it's pointed out to you. Because maybe you thought that was a way to motivate your third line to try harder. Is your third line not playing as well as the first line because they're not trying harder? And by the way, if they're sitting on the bench getting every 10th shift, how well are they going to play when they get out there? They're frozen, they're cold, their hands are iced up, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they can't do it. And I'm one of the kids who got to play on the first line, okay? But I didn't realize till I got older, and when I first started coaching, I did that. Well, whenever I tell this story, someone goes home and tells their spouse, well, then he's not trying to. Okay, here's the brag part. Not hockey, but soccer. I twice have inherited teams that were doing that, and twice took that youth team to the provincial championship playing everybody. And soccer is worse than hockey for just playing the starting 11 and leaving them out there. We won the USA Cup tournament. I don't think any other team from Winnipeg has done that when my players were 15, my 15-year-old girls. They were the last place team in Winnipeg. 2 years later, we won that international tournament. And we said, well, you weren't playing everybody then. I played everybody through the playoffs and into final and into overtime of the final and rotated. Soccer even has a rule where they get into really serious competitions where they limit you to 5 subs, forcing you to leave some kids on the bench, which I strongly disagree with because I think it's cruel to those kids to say you're going to come practice all year, but then when it's really on the line, I'm going to tell you that you're not good enough. And that competition between those players creates problems both ways because the ones who aren't on the first line start getting full of themselves. Start getting bitter and twisted and resentful of the kids who are, and the ones who are on the first line start getting full of themselves. Now, how do some coaches abandon responsibility? Because I hear this story all the time. I asked the players if they were okay with shorting the bench in the third period. And they were all okay with it. Okay. Well, if you're on the top 2 lines, you're okay with it because you're getting more ice time. If you're on the third line, are you going to be the one who speaks up and says, I want to play even though we're going to lose in front of the coach and your teammates? Because you're the one expected to take one for the team now and say, oh, I'm okay with that. How many of those kids really don't want to be playing in the third period? Well, only if we destroyed their confidence. And how would we do that? By making them fearing failure. And how would we do that? By not letting them play if they don't play well enough. They want to know why they panic when they get the puck, when they get their shift. Then we go, see, kid can't play. Self-fulfilling. Self-fulfilling. They took him on the team, they made him on the team. Why is he on the team if they can't play? We do selections, we do tiering, fair enough. But if they made your team, they should play. Just my opinion. I teach business is the same thing. Stop ranking your kids, stop scoring your kids, and stop pitting your kids against each other. You'll have a happier family. Same thing's true in the workplace, same thing's true in sports. And the second thing is you got to deal with their misbehavior. You can't expect them to sort it out themselves. Take responsibility. You're a leader. Because the top two causes, in my opinion, of bad teamwork in the workplace are internal competition. I'm fighting you for top dog. I'm fighting you for the prize. And if you win, I resent you. And if I win, you resent me. Hey, TV show Survivor does 3 management best practices. Self-directed work team, there's no leader in place. Competition between each other, against each other, and 360 peer reviews. Those are 3 management best practices. All done on Survivor, and what do you get? Absolute chaos, backstabbing, and no teamwork. You want no teamwork? Institute management instinctive best practices. The worker's worthy of their wages, and the only way that you can actually pay a player is to put them on the ice. Now, that would make you a humble and unselfish person if you can do that, because it means you're willing actually to hurt your coaching record, perhaps, from time to time, if it were true that you would lose by playing them all. I'm not sure it's true, because I sure hear a lot of NHL coaches say they sure like it when they can roll 4 lines. And my theory is, how do you get to where you can roll 4 lines? You spend a lot of time developing your 3rd and 4th line. And how do you do that? They're sitting on the pine. Okay, I don't know professional coaching. I've never been there. I would defer to other people on that. But at least the guy on the bench in the NHL is being paid a couple million a year to sit there. That kid is not. They're not. Therefore, you got to eliminate internal competition between your players. And what I used to tell my players in both soccer, hockey, basketball was, you want an individual award from your coach, you're going to have to take up soccer, take up tennis or golf, because those are individual sports. So I find it interesting that there are places in the world where they have a rule where you've got to play everybody equally, and they also have a rule where we don't keep individual stats. Because what would be the purpose of that? To figure out who's going to get the top scorer award. Do you ever got a top back checker award? That's a little tougher to keep track of. It's also valuable. Eliminate internal competition. I'm offering that as a wise thing for leaders to do, in my opinion. And eliminate internal misconduct. It's your responsibility as a coach. But back to the main theme. Coaching is about character and wisdom. And every sports out there, every management system out there, should make as the primary criteria selecting leaders for character, because that's very difficult to change, and then teaching them how to think. And so I would have coach training in how to think, not just technical. But if I got to teach you not to abuse kids, you shouldn't be coaching, is what I should say to the coach who abuses kids. Not you haven't had enough training, because that's a character issue if you think it's okay to abuse kids. I shouldn't have to tell you it's not okay. Now, if you mean well, but are doing things that are counterproductive, that's wisdom. We can teach you that. But we have to start with mean well. So character makes you want to do the right thing. I'll just summarize it with this. Character makes you want to do the right thing. And wisdom is what tells you what the right thing is. So Solomon wanted to do the right thing, but he needed wisdom to know what the right thing was. And you need both. The first one we select for, you select for character. And then you can teach people how to think, and they can learn wisdom. Any questions? That's my do-over. Thanks for listening.